My name is Dustin Miller. I'm joined here by my colleague Ann Dickinson. We'll introduce ourselves just in a second, but you are in the Career Fair Prep presentation, and we are here to help you ace the event, virtual or in person. The cool thing about our office is that we do offer both modalities, but definitely some of the busier times of the year, September to February, for the fair season. So we're excited to get you ready for that. So I'll pass it over to Ann to introduce herself.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin. Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Dickinson. I head up the College of Arts and Sciences team here in Career Services, and I'm also co-running the fair next week, which is Career Link. We're going to talk about some of the upcoming fairs this fall that you're all welcome to attend. And I also just wanted to add and reiterate what Dustin said. This is meant to be interactive, so please feel free to ask questions in the chat throughout. It's fine if you want to have your camera off. We will leave time at the end too for Q&As. And also, there's no wrong questions, so feel free to ask anything. I love new questions that I haven't heard before. And if you want to private message it to us too, that is fine as well. We won't disclose who you are. And with that, I will turn it over to Dustin.
Thanks, Ann. And as I kind of said earlier, my name is Dustin Miller. I'm an associate director here in the office on the School of Engineering and Applied Science team. But our office works collaboratively all the time. Example, as Ann and I presenting together here. So we are all generalists for those of you who are unfamiliar with our office, but we do work with specific student populations as well. So let's get into some of the content here today. So we wanted to give you an idea of what we will be covering today. So I mentioned our career fairs are both virtual, in person. How are they different? How are they similar? So we'll definitely be able to talk a little bit about that. Action items for you to be able to do and prepare now for the fair. Like Ann just mentioned, the first fair is going to be a week from tomorrow. So you have plenty of time to prepare. And we're going to talk about best practices and doing employer research for the fair. Ann's definitely going to highlight some great day of tips and tricks so that you can kind of find a way to optimize your time and maximize it during the event itself. And then also any questions, and they can be saved for the end, but anything else Ann mentioned too throughout. So please be able to throw those in the chat or message us or save them. So here is just, if you want to take a second here and either like grab a picture of this, it is on our website too, so no worries if not, but just wanted to be able to give you a preview of some of the upcoming fairs that we have. I think CareerLink most recently was over 80 employers, and I think I had seen, which is great. And I know some of the engineering and technology fairs were upwards of already over 50 or 60 employers, I think, by now. So those numbers will continue to climb as the dates get closer. But then we have information for both employers and students. So just wanted to give you an idea of what to expect this coming September. And then for any nursing folks here on the call, there is a nursing fair later in the semester that takes place in November. So keep an eye out for that as well. And there's also the instructions, if you don't see them in the top right there, of how you can navigate to the events to be able to filter by career fair, and then you can register for the fair. And if you run into a friend or somebody on campus while you're headed over to the fair and they're like, well, I didn't register or I can't go, you totally can. Just make sure they have their pen card, and we'll get you all checked in to get a name tag and then be able to come to the fair. But it's a good idea to register for it, just so you can bookmark and get any information. Our teams are constantly sending out info with updates, things that you can be doing to prepare, and just important announcements in general. Whoops. So there are, as we mentioned, two different venues here and two different modalities that our office offers. So we do have the traditional career fair, which you might think of as, you see in the pictures here with the booth and people being able to come and interact in a live face-to-face type interaction, which can be really great to start to kind of build the network and the connection. One of the common questions I get a lot in appointments with students is, Dustin, well, do career fairs actually work? And I always push back and I say, well, what do you mean by actually work? Like, what does that mean? And sometimes they'll say, well, am I going to get a job from going to this fair? And my response typically is, you're not likely going to walk out of the fair with an offer in hand or an internship in hand. That'd be fantastic if you did. And if you do, please tell us, because that's a huge success story. But most often what happens is the networking and the connections that you're making during the fair. Even if it's something that you're not 100% sure about, you have a great conversation. I really think circling back with somebody, after the fair can be really important to be able to thank them. They're meeting with a lot of students, so try to stand out in your conversation, ask something a little bit different, ask something about them. People love to talk about themselves. So that's just kind of like that traditional fair. You show up in person, you check in, you walk around, kind of scout out the people that you want to talk to. And then we have the virtual career fair option. These are run through Handshake. And if you haven't done a Handshake virtual fair before, the easiest way to explain it is there's group sessions, kind of led by the employer for the most part. They're kind of like info sessions about what the opportunities the employer would have. And then there's one-on-one sessions that last, I think, for about 10 minutes or so. So those are really great opportunities. It kind of like mimics if you had gone up to the table at the in-person career fair, but just from a virtual perspective too. But we'll kind of talk about like best practices in general. So navigating in Handshake, you'll see here, I definitely recommend being able to look. This is just a screenshot from what it looks like from the student side here. That employers tab that's toggled right there at the top. So there's details on the left, which we'll talk all about, like an overview of the fair, what to expect, important need to know information. The most important info is pretty much the time and the place. And so you want to make sure that you're part of the event. But the employers is where you can really start to do some of the information or some of the research rather, that we're going to talk a little bit about in particular. And again, same thing, the virtual fair is lined up in a very similar way. Being able to look at the employers ahead of time is a great way to make sure that you're starting off on the right foot when you're entering a conversation. And then we do have Handshake has a ton of great blogs too. So I know maybe virtual fairs could be different for some people or not something in particular that they're familiar with. So they have blogs, how to get the most out of the fair. They also have like tagging different virtual fairs. Sometimes our office won't be the ones running the fair, but we're part of like a consortium group as well. So it's called the Ivy Plus group. So sometimes these are other Ivy League institutions, but also a couple of additional schools such as Duke, Stanford, UChicago. These are other schools that sometimes will put on events that both Ann and I have also worked on in the past. And those will come up during other points of the semester. So definitely be on the lookout, like not just for Penn fairs, but thinking about where else you can find opportunity. Handshake does a great job of advertising it, but we do have this tag for virtual career fairs. If you want to be able to get some more info on what to expect, we definitely recommend checking out some of these blogs. Now, there are some serious perks to a virtual career fair as well. So not having a line or walking, if you're somebody that's like, I really don't love being around tons of people at once, or it's really loud, or it's hard for me to concentrate, maybe a virtual fair is a good idea for you. You're going to be able to, not have a line. You'll have a set schedule. You'll know who you're meeting with and when. It's very predictable. So if you're somebody who enjoys and appreciates control over something like that, that's not a bad exactly. That's a great perk to have, honestly, and to give you some control because you'll be nervous naturally, which is okay. Just means you care, and so we want to help prepare you today to try to conquer some of those nerves, and so that you can feel your best when walking into the day. You do have the time to adequately prepare and research employers without the distractions, like I mentioned. Those do have a limited capacity, so make sure that you're looking at those in advance when you're able to kind of schedule some of those one-on-one sessions as well. And then I mentioned the group sessions, which again are kind of more of like a Q&A. So you can stand out in those maybe like towards the end when they open it up for questions. We, of course, want to make sure we're not dominating a conversation and allowing others to chime into. Those are things that employers will pick up on. And you don't have to worry about, this is like a logistical thing, but you don't have to worry about like being somewhere like physically like on time. You just have to be there like on Zoom. So whether like you're in your room or if you have a quiet space in the library or one of the academic buildings, you don't have to worry about like a book bag or just like all this stuff. You can just be in your own space and comfortable. So a lot of people definitely appreciate that flexibility. Now, in advance, there's a couple of things that you should make sure you're doing in Handshake, really, for the most part here. So you're going to want to make sure that your profile is up to date, but also visible to employers. So if you have things visible to employers, they're going to be able to like see your profile. We've heard of students before who are just a little confused about why employer might not be able to reach out to them. So just check some of those privacy settings, especially for any new students here to the institution that have had their Handshake accounts set up and now activated just for the first time. Just go through some of those things. There's some default settings that you might want to go through and just ensure that they're selected to the versions that you would like and preferences too. Have an updated resume. So a couple of quick plugs about updating your resume in general. Our office hosts a couple of different resume labs. So check Handshake. Surprise, surprise, talking about Handshake, but check Handshake to find some opportunities to have your resume reviewed. This is somewhere where you can come to a lab and learn a little bit about a resume, but then have some feedback. We also have a great section on our website under the Learn How To tab. It's write a resume or CV, and we have some resources. If you've never started before, you can go to some of our templates that we have, and we have other examples specific to different schools and programs. So really helpful if you're not exactly sure where to start. Definitely recommend starting that out. But you want to have a shareable link and Handshake for people to be able to see your resume too. Um, and if it's virtual, have that quiet space in advance. You don't want to have like sometimes people with computers on virtual fairs. I'm going to do it with my computer in a second. They look like this, and you're kind of like just have like your head all the way down, and you're not exactly sure like who you're talking to. Like try to have like the computer like up a little bit, or if you need to like prop it on a book. That is something that you want to do if you want like a virtual background. If your room's a mess or if you're in the library. So you just want to be really smart about your surroundings. If you're the one that has the noisy roommate, or if you are the noisy roommate, give somebody a heads up that you're going to be, on a virtual fair, and just if you want to like use your room in particular or something like that. And then you want to have like something that's another benefit of like what you wear to the fair in person versus virtual. So if you're on a virtual fair, in theory, you don't have to have the full outfit. Maybe you just have like the top that you'd like to have. There is some research that shows that dressing like the full way though like makes you feel like even more confident. So like if you really want to have like your head in the game and you feel like you're excited, I've done that even for interviews for jobs before, even though it was virtual. I was like sitting there in my house like wearing dress shoes. So it's definitely something that you can do. And then just again, review and research the list of registered employers. Now, this is what some of like the one-on-one registrations will look like. So you'll see again different blocks when people are being able to like have like availability. And if you don't see something for an employer, that does not mean that they don't have them. Sometimes we have to end up kind of chasing employers down a little bit to make sure that they're opening up their blocks and their schedule too. So just keep checking back if you have somebody in particular that you're really interested in. And here's the thing, if you can't get one of those one-on-one registration times, you have the name of the person who's maybe representing the organization at the fair. Let's think about like some networking next steps and best practices that we can take to connect with them after the fair. So for example, Matthew here is the director of applied machine learning. Hey Matthew, so sorry I wasn't able to find some one-on-one time, but I saw that you had attended the UPenn fair virtually. Like I would love to get a chance to connect. It never hurts to send that message. So just a way that you can kind of go about being able to have that conversation, even if you weren't able to get a time as well. And also, so this is kind of going along the same lines of what I was just sharing. After the virtual fair, you can still message the person. Handshake makes it pretty easy to be able to continue the conversation like in the platform. 100% I recommend sending a thank you note after you have a conversation. You guys would be so surprised at the number of people that don't do this. And it really can make a difference. I think it's also an opportunity to extend the interview. So if you feel as if you've had a chance to have a really great conversation, don't let it end there. Continue the conversation. On the flip side, if there was something you were asked in your one-on-one session or in your group session that you thought about a little bit further, or maybe had a different answer that you wish you would have shared, why not include a little blurb of that in your message and your follow-up? And so for example, I was thinking a little bit further about how I would address challenges in the workplace with colleagues when it came to deadlines. And I forgot to mention before, and you could get into like a little bit of an answer. I'm not saying write an entire paragraph, but if there's something you wanted to touch on a little bit more, this is a great opportunity to do that. So we've kind of tossed around this idea now of like researching employers, but like, what does that mean exactly? Or like, what does that look like? So an important part of taking full advantage of any career fair, whether that be virtual or in person, is doing research on the employers who are going to be attending the fair. They're taking time. They're excited to talk to Penn students. That's why they're coming to our fair. They're constantly saying like, how can we talk to Penn students? How can we engage with Penn students? And this is one of the best ways they can do that with our office and ultimately with you all. So you want to review that list of companies in advance to figure out with whom you want to speak with. Kind of come up with a little bit of a game plan, right? So if you have an envisioned trajectory of how you want to, your conversation to go or how you want your time to be spent, this is a really great way to do it. Now, why is this important, Dustin? So and the reason it's important is because there is so much that goes into an employer of who you might want to work for. And one of the first things a lot of people think of is like, okay, money, right? Or like salary, like what am I going to be paid? Or what am I going to be doing? So there's other concessions and things that you want to think about as well, such as like company culture. Is there room for mobility within, a role? If that's something I'm envisioning, what industry do I care about the industry that I'm in? Or do I care more so about the job function that I'm performing? Do I care about both of those things? And I need them to be like, perfectly married to have both of those. And I'll tell you, if you want both of those things, it may not be the first job. That's totally okay too. In fact, it likely probably won't be, but it's all about the experience that you're gaining. But how does their company culture fit with your needs? The products or services that they're offering? Has there been recent press or something that you've seen on LinkedIn about the company that you can bring to the conversation? And the reason you want to do this is because a majority of people are going to approach a table or approach a one-on-one session and introduce themselves, what they're studying, their student at Penn, and then they're going to ask like, oh, like, what do you look for in a candidate? And they're having the same conversation over and over again. How cool would it be for you to be able to say, hey, I saw recently on LinkedIn that you all were able to publish this really unique clinical trial study, and you had an opportunity to help, one of the first people to test, whatever, like something that's just a little bit different, get them out of their script that they've done, 200 times at that point, because the fairs do tend to run quite long. So you want to consider thinking about these things. Now, we see competitors on there, and that's not from the perspective of like, you shouldn't necessarily be like grilling the employers, right? Be like, oh, like, well, how are you guys better than, insert X company? I'm not saying or suggesting to do that, but just to have an understanding of their landscape and their market in general is a good idea. So there are various tools you can do that you can utilize for your research. So Handshake is one of those tools where it's going to have information about the employer. So I showed a screenshot a little bit earlier, and I have, on the next slide here, a page about that as well. Like just what an employer page on Handshake looks like. This sounds obvious, but a lot of people don't utilize it. Go to the organization's website. Almost every website is going to have like an about section or our story, our history. Just take a gander at it, find a couple talking points. I don't want you to waste a lot of time doing it, but you want to have some kind of an idea of just like maybe where they've come from. And this, again, is just designed to be a talking point for you to have in conversation as it comes up naturally. LinkedIn, I'm a huge LinkedIn fan. Anyone, on the call that's got a chance to, speak with me before about LinkedIn or has seen other presentations, I think it's really advantageous to your career at many points of your journey, inclusive of prepping for a career fair. So it's very easy to follow a company. If you are interested in a certain company, you should be following them on LinkedIn now. So if you see somebody on that list for the fair, check them out on LinkedIn, see what they've posted recently, see what they've been tagged in. That's an easy way to find some of that press, so you're not like, going through a bunch of like local newspaper clippings or something online to try to find something. So LinkedIn can be great. And then we're going to talk about Vault Guides, the Lippincott Library. Glassdoor is another example as well. I'll work through quickly here. This is, again, an example of an employer page. It can take you right to their page. And so, for example, if you clicked Accenture here, who's going to be attending the fair, you would then be able to see that they have their website linked. So this is something I feel like that can be really helpful as well, to be able to kind of just get directly to their site, find out some additional information before you walk into the fair. Peer searching on Handshake is something that's probably like a little bit underutilized, and it's newer. Handshake's been rolling out a couple of different features in general, but you'll see there on the left part of the slide, the circle of people, and then you can search by University of Pennsylvania as well. So being able to search, for your peers in that way, or people that have maybe worked for that company that are affiliated with Penn or that are going to be representing at the fair. Oftentimes we'll have people representing companies at the fair that are also Penn alums, and they'll be notated. We hand out like a special ribbon that says alumni. on them. So if you see somebody with that, that means they're representing a company, but also that they went to the institution. So that's a super easy talking point. Oh, like, welcome back. Like, have you been back to campus before? So these are easy conversation starters for you to have during the fair. So one of the really cool things you have access to through career services is it's free access to Vault Guides. And if you haven't heard of Vault Guides before, it's like blog and company research information. It's a ton of info. So you can kind of, I think these are like on average, Ann and I were just talking about this with some other colleagues. They're like 250-page Word, like, documents. So definitely this is where like Control F comes in handy to, find certain keywords, or if you're looking for information. But it's information that's written by people who work in these industries. So oftentimes, if we talk about some of the top industries at the institution, we hear, consulting, financial services, or, investment banking. I feel like we hear from a lot of people like, oh, I want to be consulting. And I'm like, well, what's consulting? And they're like, I have no idea, but I want to do it anyway. So I would recommend and steer somebody towards like a Vault guide to get a little bit more of an understanding. And again, you see the different types of guides here between companies, industries, specific jobs, interviewing guides. You might see skills that are required to work in an industry or a job function, all the way to, industry and common, first round interview questions. So they can really be, kind of part of, I feel like, additional prep that you're doing if you're seeing different employers or folks that you're not familiar with now, but maybe are trying to become familiar with before you enter into the fair. So that's kind of a lot of info, I know, and I hope there's been some questions in the chat, or feel free to chime in here as I get ready to pass off to Ann. But I do want to make sure everyone knows about kind of like just the logistical part and the research part of what you're doing before you get to the fair. And now what Ann's going to get a chance to talk about is going to be the actual day of, and how you can maximize the experience. So I'm going to pass it over to Ann.
Awesome. Thanks, Dustin. That was great. So I'm going to talk a little bit more of what to expect so that you feel prepared for what's actually going to happen that day. Keep in mind, I know that there's high pressure. I know you can feel stressed, and that's really, really normal. But keep in mind, these employers are super excited to meet you. They're traveling, they're spending their entire day here on campus, and they're just looking to get to know you. So what you can do to make yourself feel a little bit less stressed is possibly think ahead of time of how to prepare to talk about yourself, why you're interested in certain organizations, and that'll just give you some good talking points when you do meet the employers that day. So this is going to be relevant for both types of fairs, whether it's in person or virtual. There's three things employers really want to know about you. The first is, how can you contribute to their organization? What are you going to bring to the table? They also want to know why them. Like, what about that organization interests you? Or are you just randomly looking for someone that's hiring, or are you actually doing your research and figuring out what they do and how that aligns with your interests? And then also, what are you going to be like as a coworker? So we all want to work with people that we like, that we can get along with. You spend a lot of time at work. So whether you're an intern or it's a full-time job, that's definitely something that they'll be assessing as they're getting to know you. And a career fair is their first impression of that. So in terms of the question, how can you contribute to the organization? Some things you want to talk about, or think about rather, ahead of time are, what skills do you bring to the table? And these can be transferable skills. They don't have to be highly technical. So there's a lot, just as a Penn student, a lot of skills that you already have developed just from getting to where you are today. These skills can be communication skills, teamwork, leadership, analytical ability, organizational skills, problem solving. These are all things that employers want to hear that you've demonstrated in the past. And so being able to talk about these and then also tie them back to how they would make you a good addition to their team and to their organization will be a great way to make that good first impression. So as an example, let's say you approach an employer and they want to know what you can contribute to their organization. You might want to tell a story of a time that you demonstrated some of these skills. An example would be, in my student organization, I coordinated coordinated events for over 100 students. And that experience taught me project management and teamwork, which I know would make a great impression if I were to be hired here. That gives the employer also a little bit more of talking points for a conversation where they can ask about what type of events were you planning? What did the organization do? Those are things that can help tell more of a story and let the employer actually picture you in that role. Same thing if they're to ask, you know, a question about what experience have you had that's relevant, then you know, not everything has to be super formal. It could be that it was something as part of a volunteer event. It could be part of a class. So try not to put too much pressure on feeling like you have to have that exact experience they're looking for. I often get that question from students where they say, I want to go into this, but I have absolutely no experience. And when we get to talking a little bit more about what experience they do have, we can see the ties of where those skills are highly transferable. As Dustin mentioned, doing your research ahead of time as to why this organization, why this industry, you want to be able to speak about what you've done in terms of research, what about that company is appealing. You might see something on LinkedIn that they've posted recently that's super exciting to you and aligns with your goals. Those are things that you can plan out ahead of time to talk about when you do meet with these employers. And then last, what are you going to be like as a coworker? Try to think, how would you describe yourself? How would a past supervisor describe you? Being able to articulate that in a way that shows that you would be a fun and reliable person to work with would make them feel more likely that you'd be a great hire. An example of that could be, my friends would describe me as maybe the person that keeps everybody calm when the situation is high pressure. In group projects, maybe I tend to be the person that makes sure we hit deadlines and I keep everybody on track so that we are supporting the end goal. And again, it just gives the employer a little bit more of an idea of who you would be like to work with. All right. And this would also be applicable for both types of fairs. An employer will often lead with, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? And this is just a really quick exercise. If you could, you know, weigh in the chat in terms of which of these three options is the best. Right at first glance, which one seems like it would be the best way to answer if an employer were to ask this question? The first one is, I'm a junior. I don't really know what I want to do yet, but I'm keeping my options open. Second one, I'm a junior majoring in economics. I've been involved in student government and I've had a summer internship in marketing. I'm interested in learning how my skills in analysis and communication could contribute to opportunities at your company. And third, well, I was born in New Jersey and then I moved around a lot. I've always liked math and I play guitar in my free time. Oh, and I'm also pretty good at video games. So I see one answer in the chat so far, and spoiler, that's the right answer, B. Thanks, Megan. So B is the most, I would say, articulate as well as informative and relevant to the employer and what they're going to be looking for. You're giving a sense of your experience, your skills, your interests, all which are really important. C isn't terrible in terms of telling them a little bit about yourself. So I always tell students on resumes include an interest section because that's what takes you from a candidate to a person. So you could even do a blend of B and C if you wanted to. A makes it look like you're a little bit unfocused. It's okay to have your options open, but maybe don't communicate that as the first thing you say to an employer when they say, tell me about yourself. And next one, sorry, I'm having a little trouble with advancing the slides. There we go. Oh, one back. Okay. And an employer will often ask, why do you want to work for them? This is also really important and really common. And so A, I need a paid internship this summer and I heard your company pays a lot. B, I don't know much about your company, but I just want to get my foot in the door somewhere. And C, I'm interested in marketing and I've admired your company's campaigns using storytelling to connect with audiences. I'd love to contribute to that work and also learn from your team. So it's not rocket science. It's, you know, C is obviously the one that is probably the most compelling in terms of why you want to work for the company. So making sure you're communicating that you've done that research, you know what they do, you like them as a company, you like their culture. That's what's going to sort of make you stand out from the rest. All right, and so day of, in terms of best practices, we're going to talk a little bit about what to wear, what to bring with you. also how to interact in terms of meeting with these employers. And then also, as Dustin mentioned, knowing how to follow up, sending that thank you. I can't stress enough, as Dustin said, like a lot of students don't send thank yous. And we've heard from employers that students actually have not gotten jobs for not sending thank yous after an interview. So not necessarily a career fair, but it's just a polite, nice practice. And it also does allow to keep that conversation open. So definitely can't reiterate that enough. In terms of what to wear, so you don't have to go out and spend thousands of dollars on a new wardrobe. So don't feel pressure to do that. What's important is that you're wearing something professional. This can be in the form of a button-down shirt or blouse, pants, skirt, a dress. Try to avoid shorts, try to avoid t-shirts with lots of graphics on them. Try to avoid anything that looks either wrinkled or torn. We tell students it's business casual. We tell employers that we tell students it's business casual. A lot of the employers will be in business casual. You will see some students who dress up because, like Dustin said, it makes them feel a little bit more professional. Don't let that intimidate you. That's the personal preference. But you just want to make sure you look like you've got yourself together. Also be aware of what the, oh, did I lose the screen? Is it still there, Justin? Just went black for me. Be aware of the weather. So we're here in September and it's been beautiful these past couple of days. I hope that next Friday is beautiful as well. But it might be hot. And if it is hot, don't feel pressure to wear a blazer if that's something that you were thinking about. Wear layers if it's something that you can take off so that you're not super hot in the actual career fair. And there will be a lot of people, so it could be that it gets really warm in both rooms very quickly. So again, just something to keep in mind. All right, it looks like we're back and up and running. Moving on to the next. In terms of what to bring with you, you will need your pen card to check in, so make sure you have that with you. We will have machines at the front of both Bodeck as well as Hall of Flags in Houston Hall. And you can just tap in and we'll print you a nice little name tag. And that will be your way of registering for the fair. So whether you're pre-registered or not, that's perfectly fine. Just your pen card will get you in. And that also brings up, we'll have for next week's fair, we'll have employers on both sides of Houston Hall. So sometimes students don't realize that they're in Hall of Flags as well as Bodeck Lounge. I often get asked if students should bring copies of their resume. And yes, that's something that we do recommend. More and more, we're finding employers are less likely to take paper versions. They might take it to look at in the moment, but then they might hand it back to you. Don't feel offended and feel like, oh, they don't like me. They just give me back my resume. It might be that they just want you to submit it electronically. There's also likely going to be on at most booths a QR code that we give to employers where you can check in, and that just tells the employer that you've been there, that they will have your handshake profile to connect with you, so they'll know that they had a conversation with you that day. So definitely recommend utilizing the QR code. But you just don't want to get stuck if an employer says, oh, let me see your resume, kind of looking around being, oh, I don't have it, because that's kind of an awkward part of the conversation. So make sure, I'd say, look at the number of employers that are coming that you're interested in and make sure you have at least enough for the ones you hope to talk to. That should probably be on the safe side. Bring something to write with, because you'll be wanting to jot down maybe notes after you talk to somebody. Try not to do it as much in the moment. Try to be engaged and being able to have an actual conversation without feeling distracted. But having like a notepad or a Padfolio or something professional that you can step aside after you've had a conversation with the employer to just jot down, oh, talked about X, Y, and Z, maybe try to get their email if they don't have business cards, so that you can send that follow-up. And try not to bring too much stuff with you. We know that you're going to be coming from class and sometimes you're trying to fit in trips to the career fair between classes or other commitments. So you might have your backpack or other things. We will have an area for you to set your stuff. It's just not going to be monitored. So try not to have anything valuable like a laptop or something that could potentially get taken. So that's just something as you're sort of packing up in the morning for that day, try to keep that in mind. Things to not bring with you. You want to be careful of beverages that you could set down on the table and then they could accidentally spill. Food, not something you can definitely eat outside of the career fair, but don't bring in things when you're talking to employers at the tables. Bottled water is fine if you want to carry that around with you. Large backpacks or shoulder bags, they're just cumbersome. So try to leave them at home if you can. And make sure your phone's on silent. Again, it is pretty loud in there, but that can be really distracting if you're trying to have a conversation with an employer. And this is something that it's not the most obvious, but maybe if you're going out to talk to employer, don't have their competitor's logo on your shirt. So just little things to keep in your mind that might seem silly, but could make for a better conversation if that's not the case. All right. And let's see if we can advance. All right. So when you are actually picturing yourself at the career fair, let's talk, this is the in-person career fair. You show up to the registration table, you tap your pen card, you get your little name tag. We will have a career fair map that shows where everybody is in the room, and then you can start navigating the fair. You might have to stand in line. It might be that there's 6, 7, 8, sometimes much longer people deep. So you want to be strategic about who you're going to see first and who you're going to wait in line for, and try to look at your schedule to make sure that you do get to see everybody that you want to. While you're waiting in line, you can prepare yourself and maybe in your head practice how you're going to approach the employer and what you're going to say. So when you do finally get up to the front, you want to make sure that you're making a really good impression. So smiling big, letting them know you're excited to be there, you're excited to talk to them. And then definitely, trying to read the employer. Post-COVID, sometimes the handshake, has kind of gone out the window a little bit. So if they reach to shake your hand, you want to have a nice firm handshake. But if it, feels like, oh, they're just kind of waving and saying hello, then just a friendly, hi, nice to meet you works just fine. And then next, in terms of your 30-second commercial or elevator pitch, whatever you want to call it, try to think of this as kind of your highlight reel. This is where you're making that very first impression to tell them about yourself. So things like your name, who you are, what experience you have that makes it relevant that you're interested in talking with them, why you're interested in their company, and then just be very enthusiastic. We know that employers really appreciate the students that bring that energy and are super curious, and their authentic selves as well. They're the ones who tend to do well in these situations. And then after you've had that time talking with them, try not to take more than about 2-3 minutes or so, because again, probably a line has formed behind you and you want to be respectful of their time. You can step aside and maybe jot down what you learned, try to think of what specifically with that employer and with that conversation stood out. And then make sure you do get their contact information before you leave the table, because then you can send that brief thank you note. And it doesn't have to be a super long one, just sort of thanking them for coming to campus, maybe mentioning something unique that you talked about so they remember you, and possibly asking about steps, for applying, or if they're going to be on campus for some other event, saying that you're looking forward to seeing them at that info session or coffee chat or whatnot. For virtual fairs, there are some nuances in terms of technical considerations. So you want to make sure that you are using a browser that is going to work well for that fair. Safari is not handshake friendly. So stay away from Safari, but Chrome and Firefox are typically recommended. Dustin mentioned this earlier, but you want to make sure your resume is public so that the employers can view it. And then just in case something goes wrong, there's always system, malfunctions. We never can predict with technology. I usually recommend having a backup link that you could drop into the chat for them in case something either on their end or your end goes wrong. This is important. So be aware of your sound settings. If you're in a group session, make sure you stay on mute, because it can be really distracting if it's a large group session and only one person has their button unmuted and it's really loud. And then make sure you're unmuted, obviously, for one-on-ones, because it's just the two of you that are going to be talking. But keep in mind your environment when you're going to these things. If you are in, let's say, a coffee shop and you have your earbuds in that are noise canceling and you can hear perfectly fine, but it's loud around you, the employer might pick up on a lot of those sounds too. So you just want to be mindful and be in a quiet setting where you won't be interrupted. You'll have good Wi-Fi, all the above. And as Dustin mentioned, still dress professionally, at least from the waist up, if not totally, it's up to you what you're more comfortable in. But you want to make sure that you do look professional, you look ready to have a conversation, and that you're respectful of their time. And then things happen. You might have signed up or been overzealous about the number of one-on-ones you signed up for. You might get sick that day and at the last minute not be able to attend a one-on-one. You do have up to 10 minutes before that's supposed to take place to cancel it. Make sure you send just a nice apology for having to cancel, and maybe even try to come up with a plan for connecting with them in the future. And then same thing with a group session. You can actually join at any point. So you don't have to necessarily have pre-registered for that. If last minute you're able to join, then you can still do that as long as it's still going on.